Welcome to the Story Lab. I hope you enjoy this story. Let's begin. I stared at my computer screen, the lines of the blueprint blurring before my eyes. Another long day at the office was drawing to a close. I rubbed my temples, feeling the familiar ache of eye strain setting in. Just a few more tweaks to this design and I could head home to Agnes and Emily. My phone buzzed. A text from Agnes. Working late again. Don't wait up. I frowned. It was the third time this week. Something felt off, but I pushed the thought aside. I had a family to provide for, after all. As I packed up my things, my eye caught Emily's iPad on the corner of my desk. She must have left it here when she visited the office earlier. I picked it up, intending to bring it home to her. The screen lit up as I moved it, revealing the camera roll. My finger hovered over the power button when a thumbnail caught my eye. It was Agnes, but something was wrong. I tapped the video, and my world shattered. There she was, my wife of 15 years, locked in a passionate embrace with another man. They were in our living room, on the couch where we'd spent countless family movie nights. I felt bile rise in my throat, pulling him closer. "Oh, Steve," she moaned. "I've been waiting for this all day." The video cut off abruptly, but the damage was done. My hands shook as I set the iPad down. Emily must have accidentally recorded this betrayal. My sweet, innocent daughter, unknowingly capturing the destruction of our family. I closed my eyes, trying to steady my breathing. Rage boiled inside me, threatening to explode. But I couldn't let it. Not yet. I had to think, to plan. Agnes had no idea I knew. That gave me an advantage. The drive home was a blur. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. By the time I pulled into our driveway, I had made up my mind. I would confront her tonight, but I needed to stay calm. I needed answers. Agnes was in the kitchen when I walked in, humming to herself as she chopped vegetables for dinner. The sight of her, so casual, so normal, made my stomach churn. "Hey, honey," she said, not looking up. "How was work?" I set Emily's iPad on the counter. "Fine. Emily left this at the office." Agnes glanced at it, then back to her chopping. "Oh, good. She's been looking for that." I watched her for a moment, searching for any sign of guilt, any hint of the woman I'd seen in that video. There was nothing. "Agnes," I said, keeping my voice steady. "We need to talk." She set down the knife, finally meeting my eyes. "What's wrong, Jarrett? You look upset." I took a deep breath. "I saw the video, Agnes. I know about Steve." For a split second, I saw panic flash across her face. Then, to my shock, she laughed. It was a cold, mocking sound that sent chills down my spine. "Oh, that," she said, waving a hand dismissively. "It's no big deal. Our daughter needs to know about her new dad someday." The casualness of her response, the complete lack of remorse, hit me like a physical blow. I stared at her, this stranger wearing my wife's face. "No big deal?" I repeated, my voice low and dangerous. "You're throwing away our marriage, our family, and it's no big deal?" Agnes rolled her eyes. "Come on, Jarrett. Don't be so dramatic. These things happen. Steve can give me things you can't. It's as simple as that." I felt my control slipping. "And what about Emily? Did you think about her at all?" "Emily will be fine," Agnes said, turning back to her vegetables. "Kids are resilient. Besides, Steve has more than enough money to give her a good life." I clenched my fists, fighting the urge to lash out. "You're talking about our daughter like she's a piece of furniture you can just move to a new house." Agnes slammed the knife down, glaring at me. "What do you want me to say, Jarrett? That I'm sorry? I'm not. Steve makes me happy. Happier than I've been in years. If you can't handle that, it's your problem." I took a step back, suddenly seeing Agnes for who she truly was. The woman I loved, the mother of my child, was gone. In her place stood a cold, selfish stranger. "This isn't over," I said, my voice ice. "You won't get away with this." Agnes laughed again, the sound grating on my nerves. "Oh, Jarrett, always so dramatic. Face it, you've lost. The sooner you accept that, the easier this will be for everyone." I turned and walked out of the kitchen, my mind racing. Agnes might think she'd won, but she had no idea what was coming. I would fight for my daughter, for my life, with everything I had. And I would make sure Agnes and her lover paid for every moment of pain they'd caused. As I climbed the stairs to Emily's room, I pushed down the anger and pain. My daughter needed me to be strong, to be the parent Agnes clearly couldn't be. I plastered on a smile as I knocked on her door. "Hey, sweetie," I said, poking my head in. "I brought your iPad home." Emily looked up from her homework, her face lighting up. "Thanks, Dad. I was looking for that everywhere." I handed her the device, my heart aching. She had no idea of the storm that was about to hit our family. I vowed then and there to protect her, no matter the cost. "Dad?" Emily's voice pulled me from my thoughts. "Are you okay? You look sad." I forced my smile wider. "I'm fine, honey. Just a long day at work. How about we have a movie night this weekend, just the two of us?" Emily nodded eagerly, and I felt a small spark of warmth in the coldness that had settled over me. I would do whatever it took to keep that smile on her face. As I left her room, I heard Agnes's phone ringing downstairs. Her hushed, excited tones drifted up the stairs. She was talking to him, to Steve, planning their next move, no doubt. Two could play at that game. I retreated to my home office, locking the door behind me. It was time to start planning my own strategy. I opened my laptop, my fingers flying over the keys as I searched for the best divorce attorneys in the area. One name kept coming up, Laura Glenn. Known for her aggressive tactics and unbeatable record, she seemed like exactly what I needed. As I dialed her office number, I glanced at the family photo on my desk. Agnes, Emily, and me, all smiles on our last vacation. The sight of it made my chest tighten. I turned the frame face down. That life was over. Now, it was time for war. The next morning, I woke early, my mind already racing with plans. Agnes was still asleep, oblivious to the storm I was about to unleash. I dressed quietly and slipped out of the house before she or Emily woke up. The offices of Glenn and Associates were sleek and modern, a far cry from the stuffy law firms I dealt with in my architectural work. Laura Glenn herself was equally impressive, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s with an air of barely contained energy. "Mr. Huffman," she said, gesturing for me to sit, "I understand you're in need of my services." I nodded, taking a seat across from her desk. "I am. My wife is having an affair, and I need to make sure I don't lose everything in the divorce." Laura's eyes gleamed with interest. "Tell me everything." For the next hour, I laid out the whole sordid story. The video, Agnes's cold dismissal of our marriage, her plans with Steve. Laura listened intently, occasionally jotting down notes. "Well, Mr. Huffman," she said when I finished, "you've certainly got a fight on your hands, but I think we can win it." I leaned forward. "How?" Laura smiled, a predatory gleam in her eye. "We're going to hit them where it hurts. Their reputation, their finances, their future. By the time we're done, they'll wish they'd never crossed you." Her words sent a thrill through me. This was exactly what I needed. Someone who understood that this wasn't just about ending a marriage, it was about justice. "What's our first move?" I asked. "Information," Laura said. "We need to know everything about Agnes and this Steve character. Their finances, their past, their dirty little secrets. I have a private investigator I work with. He's the best in the business." I nodded. "Do it, whatever it costs." Laura picked up her phone. "Miles, I've got a job for you." As she spoke with the investigator, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. I wasn't in this alone anymore. I had a team, a plan. Agnes and Steve wouldn't know what hit them. The next few weeks were a blur of secret meetings and clandestine phone calls. I played the part of the clueless husband at home, all while building my case against Agnes and Steve. Miles, the private investigator, was worth every penny. He uncovered a treasure trove of information on Steve Cordova, painting a picture of a man with a dark past and even darker present. "Your wife's boyfriend is neck-deep in organized crime," Miles told me during one of our meetings. "Money laundering, extortion, you name it. He's got his fingers in a lot of dirty pies." I felt a mix of disgust and triumph. "Can we prove it?" Miles nodded, sliding a file across the table. "It's all in here. Bank records, witness statements, even some incriminating photos. Your wife picked a real winner." I flipped through the file, my mind racing. This was exactly what I needed to ensure Agnes wouldn't get custody of Emily. No judge would hand a child over to someone involved with a criminal. But as the days went on, I noticed something strange. I was feeling increasingly tired, nauseous. At first, I chalked it up to stress, but as the symptoms worsened, a horrifying thought occurred to me. Was Agnes poisoning me? The idea seemed paranoid, even to me. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. I needed help, someone I could trust completely. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in years. Vance? It's Jarrett. I need your help. Vance Harris had been my roommate in college, before he'd been recruited into intelligence work. We'd stayed in touch sporadically over the years, and I knew if anyone could help me, it was him. We met in a quiet bar on the outskirts of town. Vance looked older than I remembered, his hair graying at the temples, but his eyes were as sharp as ever. "You look like hell, Jarrett," he said by way of greeting. I managed a weak smile. "Thanks. I feel worse." I laid out my suspicions, watching Vance's face grow increasingly. "You're right to be worried," he said when I finished. "The symptoms you're describing are consistent with low-dose poisoning. We need to get you tested immediately." The next few days were a whirlwind of secret medical tests and hushed conversations. The results confirmed our worst fears. I was being poisoned, slowly but surely. "It's clever," Vance said, looking over the test results. "The doses are small enough that it could be mistaken for a natural illness. If we hadn't caught it, you'd have been dead within months." I felt a cold rage settle over me. Agnes wasn't just trying to leave me, she was trying to kill me. "What do we do?" I asked. Vance's eyes glinted. "We turn the tables. You're going to play sick, make her think her plan is working. Meanwhile, we'll be gathering evidence and building our case." I nodded, a plan forming in my mind. "And when the time is right, we strike." "Exactly," Vance said. "She won't know what hit her." As I drove home that night, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. Agnes thought she was so clever, so untouchable, but she had no idea who she was dealing with. I would take everything from her, just as she had tried to take everything from me. I pulled into the driveway, steeling myself for another evening of pretending. As I walked into the house, I heard Agnes on the phone in the kitchen. "It's working perfectly," she was saying, her voice low and excited. "He's getting sicker every day. Soon, we'll have everything we want." I clenched my fists, fighting the urge to confront her then and there. But no, I had to be patient. The time would come, and when it did, Agnes would regret ever underestimating me. I took a deep breath and walked into the kitchen, plastering on a tired smile. "Hey, honey, I'm home." Agnes turned, her face a mask of false concern. "Oh, Jarrett, you look awful. Why don't you go lie down? I'll bring you some tea." I nodded weakly, playing my part. "Thanks. I think I will." As I climbed the stairs, I allowed myself a small smile. "Enjoy your victory while you can, Agnes. The real battle is just beginning." The weeks dragged on, each day a delicate balance of gathering evidence and maintaining my facade of illness. Agnes played the role of concerned wife to perfection, all while slowly poisoning me. The irony wasn't lost on me. But today, everything would change. Today, we struck back. I sat in Laura's office, watching as she made the final preparations. The divorce papers lay on her desk, along with thick files of evidence against Agnes and Steve. "Are you ready for this, Jarrett?" Laura asked, her eyes sharp. I nodded, feeling a satisfaction. "More than ready. Let's end this." Laura picked up her phone. "Send them in." Moments later, a courier entered, taking the stack of documents. I watched as he left, knowing he was about to turn Agnes's world upside down. "Now we wait," Laura said, leaning back in her chair. We didn't have to wait long. My phone rang less than an hour later. Agnes's name flashed on the screen. I answered, keeping my voice weak and tired. "Hello? What the hell is this, Jarrett?" Agnes's voice was shrill with panic. "Divorce papers? Evidence of an affair? Attempted murder? Have you lost your mind?" I dropped the act, my voice turning cold. "No, Agnes. I've finally come to my senses. Did you really think you could get away with it? The affair, the poisoning, all of it?" There was a long pause. When Agnes spoke again, Her voice was low and dangerous. You have no idea what you've done, Jarrett. Steve and we're not people you want to cross. I laughed, the sound harsh even to my own ears. No, Agnes. You're the ones who don't know what you've done. This is just the beginning. By the time I'm done, you'll have nothing left. I hung up, my hand shaking slightly. It was done. The first shot in our war had been fired. Laura raised an eyebrow. Feel better? I nodded, a weight lifting from my shoulders. You have no idea. The next few days were a whirlwind of legal maneuvers and countermaneuvers. Agnes and Steve fought back hard, but we were ready for them. Steve tried to blackmail me, claiming he had evidence of corporate espionage. But thanks to Miles's thorough investigation, we were prepared. Nice try, Steve, I said during a tense meeting. But we both know that evidence is as fake as your business dealings. Speaking of which, how's that offshore account looking? The one filled with laundered money? The color drained from Steve's face. How did you? I leaned forward, my voice low. I know everything, Steve. Every dirty deal, every illegal transaction. You really should have looked into me before you decided to steal my wife and try to ruin my life. Steve stormed out, but I knew it wasn't over. They were cornered animals now, dangerous and unpredictable. I was proven right when Emily came home from school one day, her eyes red from crying. Daddy, she said, her voice small. Mom said you've been hurting her, that you're dangerous. Is that true? My heart broke at the fear in her eyes. I knelt down, taking her small hands in mine. No, sweetheart, that's not true at all. Your mom, she's not well right now. She's saying things that aren't true because she's scared and angry. Emily nodded, but I could see the doubt in her eyes. Agnes was poisoning our daughter against me, using her as a weapon in our war. I called Vance immediately. We need to end this. Now. Vance agreed. I've got an idea, but it's risky. The plan was simple but effective. Vance would set up hidden cameras and microphones in our home, focusing on areas where Agnes spent the most time with Emily. We'd catch her in the act of manipulating our daughter, providing irrefutable evidence of her true nature. You ready for this, Jarrett? Vance asked as he finished setting up the last camera. Things going to be crazy. I nodded firmly. Agnes crossed a line when she involved Emily. I won't let her poison our daughter's mind. Over the next few days, I watched and listened as Agnes wove her web of lies. It was sickening to hear her twist the truth, painting me as a monster to our innocent child. Remember what we talked about, sweetie? Agnes cooed to Emily one evening. If anyone asks, especially at school, you tell them Daddy hurt you. It's important. Emily's voice was small and confused. But Daddy never hurt me. I know it's hard to understand, Agnes said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. But sometimes adults do bad things. We need to make sure Daddy can't hurt anyone else. I clenched my fists, rage boiling inside me. But I forced myself to stay calm. We needed this evidence. Finally, after a week of recording, we had what we needed. I met with Laura to review the footage. This is gold, Jarrett, Laura said, her eyes gleaming as she watched the videos. With this, we can prove parental alienation. Agnes won't stand a chance in court. I leaned back, a smile on my face. Good. It's time to end this. The next day, we filed for an emergency custody hearing. Agnes was blindsided, her smug confidence crumbling as Laura presented our evidence to the judge. Your Honor, Laura said, her voice ringing through the courtroom. What you're about to see is clear evidence of Mrs. Huffman's attempts to alienate her daughter from her father through manipulation and lies. As the videos played, I watched Agnes's face. She paled, then flushed with anger. Her eyes darted around the room, finally landing on me with a look of pure hatred. The judge's face grew increasingly stern as he watched. When the last video ended, he turned to Agnes. Mrs. Huffman, do you have anything to say in your defense? Agnes stammered, her usual poise completely shattered. I was just trying to protect my daughter. Jarrett, that's enough. The judge cut her off. Based on this evidence, I'm granting temporary full custody to Mr. Huffman, pending a full hearing. Mrs. Huffman, you will have supervised visitation only. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. It wasn't over yet, but it was a major victory. As we left the courtroom, Agnes grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. "This isn't over, Jarrett," she hissed. "You have no idea what's coming." I shook her off, meeting her gaze steadily. "Bring it on, Agnes. I'm ready for whatever you and your criminal boyfriend can throw at me." I walked away, leaving her fuming in the hallway. The battle was far from over, but for the first time in months, I felt like I was winning. The courtroom buzzed with tension as Laura presented our case. I sat at the plaintiff's table, my face a mask of calm determination. Across the aisle, Agnes glared daggers at me, while Steve whispered urgently to their lawyer. "Your Honor," Laura began, her voice clear and confident. "What we have here is a clear case of infidelity, attempted murder, and child manipulation. Mr. Huffman has been the victim of a calculated scheme to not only end his marriage, but to end his life and separate him from his daughter." She proceeded to lay out our evidence, piece by damning piece. The video of Agnes's affair, the medical reports proving the poisoning attempt, the recordings of Agnes manipulating Emily. With each new revelation, I could see the color draining from Agnes's face. When it was Agnes's turn to testify, she tried to play the victim. "Your Honor, I was trapped in a loveless marriage. Jarrett was cold, distant. I only wanted what was best for Emily." "Mrs. Huffman," the judge interrupted, his voice stern. "Are you saying that attempting to poison your husband was what was best for your daughter?" Agnes faltered, her carefully crafted facade cracking. That's not. He's lying about that." "We have medical evidence, Mrs. Huffman," the judge reminded her. "Are you accusing the hospital of lying as well?" As Agnes floundered, I caught Steve's eye. He was watching the proceedings with growing alarm, no doubt realizing that his carefully laid plans were unraveling. During a recess, I overheard Steve talking to a man I didn't recognize. "Find something, anything on Huffman," Steve growled. "I don't care what it takes. We need to discredit him." I smirked to myself. Let them try. My records were clean, and Laura had prepared for every possible attack. Sure enough, the next day, Steve's lawyer presented a series of documents allegedly proving my involvement in corporate espionage. "Your Honor," the lawyer said, a smug smile on his face. "These documents clearly show Mr. Huffman engaging in illegal business practices. He's hardly fit to be a father." Laura stood, calm and collected. "Your Honor, we were expecting this desperate attempt at character assassination. If you look at the documents we're submitting now, you'll see that Mr. Huffman's business dealings have been thoroughly audited and found to be completely above board. Furthermore, we have evidence that Mr. Cordova himself is involved in money laundering and other illegal activities." The judge examined both sets of documents, his frown deepening as he read. "Mr. Cordova," he said finally, "I'm referring these allegations to the district attorney's office for investigation. As for these accusations against Mr. Huffman, they appear to be baseless and possibly fabricated. I'm warning you now, any further attempts to mislead this court will result in severe consequences." I could see Steve's face turning red with anger and fear. Good. Let him squirm. The next blow came when Agnes tried to play her final card. Emily was called to testify, and I felt my heart break as I saw the fear and confusion in my daughter's eyes. "Emily, sweetie," Agnes's lawyer said gently, "can you tell us if your daddy ever hurt you?" Emily looked at me, then at Agnes, clearly torn. I held my breath, praying that the truth would win out. "Mommy told me to say Daddy hurt me," Emily said finally, her voice small but clear. "But he never did. Mommy said it was important to lie, but I don't want to lie anymore." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Agnes looked like she'd been slapped, while Steve buried his face in his hands. "Order," the judge called, banging his gavel. "Mrs. Huffman, this is a very serious allegation. Suborning perjury from a minor is a criminal offense." As Agnes stammered out denials, Laura leaned over to me. "We've got them on the ropes," she whispered. "But brace yourself. They're going to get desperate now." I nodded. "Let them come. I'm ready." The final surprise of the day came when a woman I didn't recognize asked to address the court. The judge, after conferring with the lawyers, allowed it. "Your Honor, my name is Sandra Huffman. I'm Agnes's sister, and I have information relevant to this case." Agnes went pale. "Sandra, don't you dare." Sandra ignored her sister, her face set with determination. I've known Agnes all my life, and I can tell you that what you've seen here is nothing new. She's always been manipulative, always put her own desires above everyone else's. She cheated on every boyfriend she ever had, including Jarrett. I kept quiet for years, but I can't stand by and watch her destroy this family any longer. As Sandra continued her testimony, detailing years of Agnes's lies and manipulations, I felt a mix of vindication and sadness. How had I not seen this side of Agnes for so long? When court adjourned for the day, I approached Sandra in the hallway. "Thank you," I said simply. "I know that couldn't have been easy." Sandra gave me a sad smile. "It wasn't, but it was right. I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner, Jarrett. Maybe I could have prevented some of this." I shook my head. "You're here now. That's what matters." As we walked out of the courthouse, I saw Agnes and Steve in heated discussion with their lawyer. They looked panicked, desperate. Good. They were finally realizing that their house of cards was collapsing. Laura fell into step beside me. "We've made significant progress today, but don't let your guard down. They're cornered now, which makes them more dangerous than ever." I nodded. "I know. But whatever they throw at us next, we'll be ready." The next few days were a whirlwind of legal maneuvers and countermaneuvers. Agnes and Steve were growing increasingly desperate, and I knew they wouldn't go down without a fight. I was proven right when Laura called me into her office. "We've got a problem," she said without preamble. "I've just received word that someone tried to bribe Judge Matthews." I felt my blood run cold. "Steve?" Laura nodded. "Almost certainly. But here's the good news. I anticipated something like this. We've been monitoring all of Steve's communications. We not only have proof of the bribe attempt, but we also caught him discussing it beforehand." I leaned back, a smile on my face. "So we've got him." "We've got him," Laura confirmed. "I've already forwarded the evidence to the DA's office. Steve Cordova is going to have a lot more to worry about than just losing this custody case." As we were discussing our next move, my phone rang. It was Vance. "Jarrett, we've got a situation," he said, his voice tense. "I've picked up chatter about a hit being put out on you." I felt a chill run down my spine. "Agnes?" "Looks like it. She's contacted someone named Marcellus Murillo. He's bad news, Jarrett. A professional fixer who specializes in making problems disappear permanently." I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. "What do we do?" "I'm implementing countermeasures now," Vance said. "But you need to be on high alert. Don't go anywhere alone, vary your routines, and for God's sake, watch your back." After I hung up, I filled Laura in on the new development. "Jesus, Jarrett," she breathed. "This is getting serious. Maybe we should consider police protection." I shook my head firmly. "No, we play this smart, but we don't back down. Agnes and Steve want to play hardball? Fine. Let's show them how it's done." Over the next week, I lived in a state of constant vigilance. Vance's team kept watch over me and Emily while we continued to build our case. The assassination attempt came on a Tuesday. I was leaving the office, my mind on the upcoming court date, when I noticed a car following me. Years of Vance's paranoid warnings kicked in, and I took evasive action, calling him as I drove. "I've got a tail," I said tersely. "Black sedan, 2 occupants." "I see them," Vance replied, his voice calm. "There's an alley coming up on your right. Take it." I did as he said, my heart pounding. As soon as I turned into the alley, I heard screeching tires behind me. "Now, Jarrett!" Vance shouted. "Hard brake." I slammed on the brakes just as a van came barreling out of a side street, T-boning the car that had been following me. In seconds, Vance and his team had surrounded the vehicle, weapons drawn. "You okay?" Vance asked, appearing at my window. I nodded, my hands shaking slightly on the steering wheel. "Yeah, thanks to you." Vance's face was stern. "Don't thank me yet. This is far from over." He was right. The failed assassination attempt made the news, turning public opinion even more against Agnes and Steve. Laura used the incident to paint them as desperate criminals willing to do anything to get what they wanted. In a surprising turn of events, a woman named Darcy Cordova reached out to us. She turned out to be Steve's ex-wife. and she had a story to tell. "Steve is a monster," Darcy told us, her voice shaking. "He abused me for years, physically and emotionally. And the things he's involved in, I was too afraid to speak up before, but I can't stay silent anymore." Darcy's testimony was the final nail in Steve's coffin. She provided details of his illegal activities that corroborated our existing evidence, painting a damning picture of a man who had built his empire on crime and cruelty. As the final court date approached, I could see Agnes and Steve unraveling. They knew they were beaten, but they were too proud, too angry to concede. The night before the hearing, I tucked Emily into bed, my heart aching at the toll this ordeal had taken on her. "Daddy," she said sleepily, "are you and Mommy going to stop fighting soon?" I stroked her hair gently. "Soon, sweetheart. I promise, it'll all be over soon." As I closed her door, I steeled myself for what was to come. Tomorrow would be the final battle, and I was determined to win, not just for myself, but for Emily. She deserved a life free from manipulation and lies, and I would do whatever it took to give her that. The courthouse was a media circus. Reporters jostled for position, shouting questions as we made our way inside. I kept my head high, ignoring the cacophony around me. Inside, the tension was palpable. Agnes and Steve sat at their table, both looking haggard and defeated. Their lawyer was frantically shuffling papers, a look of desperation on his face. Laura leaned in close to me. "Remember, stay calm no matter what happens. We've got this." I nodded, my jaw set. "I'm ready." The judge entered, and the room fell silent. "Before we begin," he said, his voice stern, "I want to make it clear that I will not tolerate any further attempts to mislead or manipulate this court. Is that understood?" Both legal teams nodded their assent. "Very well. Miss Glenn, you may call your first witness." Laura stood. "Your Honor, the plaintiff calls Steve Cordova to the stand." Steve's face went pale as he made his way to the witness box. Laura's questioning was relentless, picking apart every lie, every deception. "Mr. Cordova," she said, her voice sharp, "can you explain the discrepancies in your financial records? Specifically, the large sums of money moving through offshore accounts?" Steve squirmed. That's just normal business operations." "Normal business operations that coincide with known money laundering patterns?" Laura pressed. "Perhaps you'd like to explain that to the IRS agents waiting outside?" As Steve fumbled for answers, I could see Agnes growing more and more agitated. When it was her turn on the stand, she tried one last desperate gambit. "Your Honor," she said, tears in her eyes, "I admit I made mistakes. But everything I did was to protect my daughter from a controlling, abusive man." The judge's eyes narrowed. "Mrs. Huffman, are you now claiming that Mr. Huffman was abusive, despite all evidence to the contrary, including your daughter's own testimony?" Agnes faltered. He was abusive in other ways. Emotionally." "Your Honor," Laura interjected, "I'd like to present Exhibit C, a series of text messages between Mrs. Huffman and Mr. Cordova, discussing their plans to, and I quote, take Jarrett for everything he's worth." As Laura read out the damning messages, I watched Agnes's face crumble. She knew it was over. The final blow came from an unexpected quarter. Several of Steve's former business associates, sensing which way the wind was blowing, had come forward with their own testimonies of his illegal dealings. One by one, they painted a picture of a man who had built his fortune on fraud, intimidation, and outright theft. By the time the last witness stepped down, Steve looked like a man facing the gallows. In his closing statement, Agnes and Steve's lawyer made a half-hearted attempt to salvage something from the wreckage. "Your Honor, while my clients may have made some regrettable choices, we must consider the well-being of the child. Emily needs both her parents in her life." Laura stood up, her eyes flashing. "Your Honor, if I may. The well-being of Emily is precisely why Mr. Huffman should be granted full custody. Mrs. Huffman has repeatedly shown that she's willing to put her own desires above her daughter's welfare. She manipulated Emily, coached her to lie, and exposed her to a dangerous criminal environment through her association with Mr. Cordova." The judge nodded, his face grave. "I've heard enough. This court will take a brief recess while I consider my decision." As we waited, I felt a strange calm settle over me. Whatever happened next, I knew I had done everything in my power to protect Emily. When the judge returned, the courtroom fell silent. In the matter of custody for Emily Huffman, he began, his voice firm. This court finds in favor of Jared Huffman. Full custody is hereby granted to Mr. Huffman, with Mrs. Huffman allowed supervised visitation at Mr. Huffman's discretion. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. We'd won. The judge continued, his tone growing harsher. Furthermore, given the evidence presented of attempted murder, child manipulation, and various financial crimes, I'm referring this case to the District Attorney's Office for criminal prosecution. Mr. Cordova and Mrs. Huffman are to surrender their passports immediately and report to the bailiff for processing. Agnes let out a strangled cry, while Steve slumped in his chair, defeated. As the bailiffs moved to take them into custody, Agnes locked eyes with me one last time. "This isn't over, Jarrett," she hissed. "I'll get you for this." I met her gaze steadily. "It is over, Agnes. You lost. Take responsibility for once in your life." As they were led away, Laura turned to me with a triumphant smile. "We did it, Jarrett. It's finally over." I nodded, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. "Thank you, Laura, for everything." But our moment of victory was short-lived. Vance burst into the courtroom, his face tense. "Jarrett, we've got a problem." Agnes and Steve gave the bailiffs the slip. "They're on the run." My jaw clenched. Of course, they couldn't face the consequences of their actions. "What do we do?" Vance's eyes gleamed. "We hunt them down. I've got contacts monitoring all exit points from the city. They won't get far." And he was right. Thanks to Vance's network and an anonymous tip, which I strongly suspected came from Vance himself, Agnes and Steve were apprehended at the airport, trying to board a private jet to a non-extradition country. As I watched the news footage of their arrest, I felt no joy, no sense of vindication, just relief that it was truly, finally over. Emily tugged at my hand, her eyes wide. "Daddy, what's going to happen to Mommy?" I knelt down, meeting her gaze. "Mommy did some bad things, sweetheart. She has to face the consequences now. But I promise you, we're going to be okay." As I held my daughter close, I knew that while one chapter of our lives had closed, a new one was just beginning. And this time, I would make sure it was filled with love, honesty, and the peace that Emily deserved. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation as Agnes and Steve were led in, both looking haggard in their prison jumpsuits. The media frenzy surrounding their arrest and subsequent trials had been intense, but nothing compared to the storm that was about to break. I sat in the gallery, Laura beside me, as the prosecutor stood to address the court. "Your Honor, the state intends to prove that Agnes Huffman and Steve Cordova engaged in a systematic campaign of fraud, attempted murder, and child exploitation. The evidence we will present will show beyond any doubt that these individuals are a danger to society and should face the full consequences of their actions." As the trial progressed, witness after witness came forward, each testimony more damning than the last. Former employees of Steve's company detailed years of financial manipulation and strong-arm tactics. Medical experts confirmed the slow poisoning attempt on my life. Even Emily's therapist testified to the psychological damage Agnes's manipulation had caused. During a recess, Laura leaned over to me. "Jarrett, the prosecution wants you to testify. Are you up for it?" I nodded firmly. "Absolutely." It's time they heard the truth from me directly. Taking the stand, I looked out over the courtroom, my eyes briefly meeting Agnes's. Where I once saw the woman I loved, I now saw only a stranger, cold and unrepentant. "Mr. Huffman," the prosecutor began, "can you tell the court about the day you discovered your wife's affair?" I recounted that day, my voice steady. "I found a video on my daughter's iPad. It showed Agnes kissing Steve Cordova in our living room. Emily had accidentally recorded it. And how did Mrs. Huffman react when you confronted her?" I clenched my jaw at the memory. She laughed, said it was no big deal, and that Emily needed to know about her new dad someday. There was no remorse, no attempt to explain or apologize. The questioning continued, covering the poisoning attempt, Agnes's manipulation of Emily, and the lengths they went to try to discredit me. Through it all, I remained calm, my resolve unshaken. As I stepped down from the witness stand, I caught Steve's eye. He looked away quickly, unable to meet my gaze. Good. Let him feel the weight of his actions. The trial stretched on for weeks, but the outcome was never really in doubt. When the jury returned with their verdict, the courtroom fell silent. On the charge of attempted murder, we find the defendant, Agnes Huffman, guilty. On the charges of fraud and money laundering, we find the defendant, Steve Cordova, guilty. The litany of guilty verdicts continued, each one another nail in the coffin of their former lives. As the judge prepared to pass sentence, Agnes stood suddenly, her face contorted with rage. "This is a farce," she screamed. "Jarrett set us up. He's the real criminal here." The judge's gavel came down hard. "Mrs. Huffman, control yourself, or you will be held in contempt." Agnes subsided, glaring at me with naked hatred. I met her gaze calmly, unmoved by her outburst. The sentences, when they came, were harsh. Multiple life terms for Steve, given the extent of his criminal empire. 25 to life for Agnes, with the possibility of parole in 20 years. As they were led away, I felt no satisfaction, no sense of triumph. Just a profound relief that this chapter of my life was finally, irrevocably closed. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, shouting questions. I held up a hand for silence. "I have only this to say," I stated clearly. "Justice has been served. My focus now is on healing and building a better future for my daughter." "Thank you." As we drove home, Laura turned to me. "It's not over yet, you know. There will be appeals, civil suits." I nodded. "I know, but we're ready for them. Agnes and Steve underestimated me once. They won't make that mistake again." Later that evening, as I tucked Emily into bed, she looked up at me with serious eyes. "Daddy, are the bad people gone now?" I stroked her hair gently. "Yes, sweetheart. They can't hurt us anymore. It's just you and me now, and I promise, I'll always keep you safe." As I closed her door, my phone buzzed with a text from Vance. "Turn on the news. Now." Frowning, I flipped on the TV in my study. The breaking news banner caught my eye immediately. "Fixer TO, the stars arrested. Promises to name names." The anchor's voice filled the room. In a shocking development, notorious fixer Marcellus Murillo was arrested tonight. Sources say Murillo is already cooperating with authorities, promising to reveal details about his illegal activities on behalf of numerous high-profile clients. I sat back, a smile on my face. Vance's handiwork, no doubt. The dominoes were starting to fall, and who knew how far the ripples would spread? My phone rang. It was Sandra, Agnes's sister. "Jarrett," she said, her voice hesitant. "I saw the news. I know this might not be the right time, but I was hoping we could talk. About Emily." I paused, considering. Sandra had been instrumental in exposing Agnes's true nature. But could I trust her to be a part of Emily's life? "All right," I said finally. "Come by tomorrow afternoon. We'll talk." As I hung up, I realized that while one battle was over, new challenges were just beginning. But for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to face whatever came next. The next day, Sandra arrived, looking nervous but determined. "Jarrett," she began as we sat in the living room, "I know I have no right to ask this, but I'd like to be a part of Emily's life. She's my niece, and I want to help her heal from all of this." I studied her carefully. "Why should I trust you, Sandra, after everything that's happened?" Sandra met my gaze steadily. "Because I'm not Agnes. I made mistakes in the past by staying silent, but I'm trying to make things right. Emily deserves to know she has family who love her, who aren't like Agnes." I considered her words. "I appreciate your honesty, Sandra, but understand this. Emily's well-being comes first. If I allow you into her life, it will be on my terms, under my supervision. One wrong move, one hint that you're not being completely truthful, and you're out. Permanently. Are we clear?" Sandra nodded eagerly. "Absolutely. Thank you, Jarrett. I won't let you down." As she left, I felt a mix of hope and caution. Only time would tell if this was the right decision, but for Emily's sake, I was willing to try. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal and financial maneuvering. With Agnes and Steve's empires crumbling, Vultures were circling, looking to pick up the pieces. But thanks to Laura's expert guidance, we managed to protect what was rightfully Emily's, ensuring her future was secure. One evening, as I was reviewing some documents in my study, Vance dropped by unannounced. "Jarrett," he said, an unusual hesitancy in his voice, "I've got a proposition for you." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh." Vance leaned forward. "I'm expanding my security consulting firm. After seeing how you handled this whole mess, I think you'd be a valuable asset. What do you say? Want to put those newfound skills to use?" I was taken aback. It was a tempting offer, a chance to help others who might be in situations similar to what I'd faced. But as I opened my mouth to respond, I caught sight of a photo on my desk, Emily and me at the park, both of us laughing. "I'm honored, Vance," I said slowly, "but I think my place is here, with Emily. She needs stability now more than ever, and I need to focus on rebuilding my architecture career." Vance nodded, a small smile on his face. "I thought you might say that, but the offer stands if you ever change your mind." As he left, I turned back to the window, looking out over the city. So much had changed in such a short time. But through it all, one thing remained constant: my love for Emily and my determination to give her the life she deserved. The following week brought news that Agnes and Steve's trials were set to begin. Laura called to update me on the latest developments. "Jarrett," she said, her voice tight with excitement, "you won't believe this. We've got new evidence coming in almost daily. Former associates of Steve's, people Agnes tried to manipulate over the years, they're all coming forward now that the threat is gone." I leaned back in my chair, processing this information. What does this mean for the trials? "It means they're going away for a very, very long time," Laura replied. "The prosecution is building an airtight case. There's no wiggle room, no deals to be made. They're going down hard." As I hung up, I felt a weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying lift from my shoulders. Agnes and Steve would face justice, not just for what they'd done to me and Emily, but for all the lives they'd ruined over the years. That night, as I tucked Emily into bed, she looked up at me with those big, innocent eyes that never failed to melt my heart. "Daddy," she said softly, "are you happy now?" I paused, considering her question carefully. "You know what, sweetie? I am. Because I have you, and that's all I need to be happy." She smiled, snuggling deeper into her covers. "I'm happy too, Daddy. I love you." "I love you too, Princess," I whispered, kissing her forehead. "Sweet dreams." As I closed her door, I realized that despite all the pain and betrayal, I had emerged stronger, wiser, and more appreciative of what truly mattered in life. The future, which had once seemed so bleak, now held endless possibilities, and I was ready to embrace them all, with Emily by my side. The sun streamed through the windows of my drafting room, illuminating the blueprints spread across my desk. I stood back, surveying the design with a critical eye. This house would be more than just a project. It was a symbol of our fresh start, a physical manifestation of the new life Emily and I were building together. "What do you think, sweetheart?" I asked, turning to Emily, who sat nearby, coloring contentedly. She looked up, her face brightening. "It's beautiful, Daddy. Can my room have a big window like that one?" I chuckled, walking over to ruffle her hair. "Of course it can. This is our home, and we'll make it exactly how we want it." As I turned back to the blueprints, I heard the doorbell ring. Emily jumped up. "I'll get it. Remember to check who it is first," I called after her, a habit born from the tumultuous past months. "It's Aunt Laura." Emily's voice rang out. I smiled, making my way to the front door where Laura stood, looking as polished as ever, but with a warmth in her eyes that had become familiar over our shared ordeal. "Laura, come in," I greeted her. "What brings you by?" She held up a file. "Good news, actually. I wanted to deliver this in person." We settled in the living room, Emily returning to her coloring nearby. "So, what's the good news?" I asked, accepting the file from her. Laura's smile was triumphant. "The last of Agnes and Steve's appeals have been denied. It's over, Jarrett. Really, truly over." I let out a long breath, feeling a tension I hadn't even realized I was carrying release. "That is good news. Thank you, Laura." For everything. She waved off my thanks. It's been my pleasure, Jarrett. You and Emily deserve this peace. We chatted for a while longer, discussing the finer points of the legal aftermath. As Laura prepared to leave, she paused, her expression turning serious. Jarrett, I know we started as lawyer and client, but I hope you know I consider you a friend now. If you or Emily ever need anything, I'm here. I nodded, touched by her sincerity. Thank you, Laura. The feeling's mutual. After she left, I returned to my blueprints, my mind clearer than it had been in months. The house I was designing wasn't just a structure of wood and stone. It was a fortress of safety and love for Emily, a place where we could finally heal and grow. The next few weeks flew by in a flurry of activity. Construction on our new home began, and Emily threw herself into the process with enthusiasm, offering her input on everything from paint colors to furniture placement. One sunny afternoon, as we stood on the partially constructed second floor, overlooking what would be our backyard, Emily tugged on my hand. Daddy, she said, her voice serious, can we have a treehouse? I looked down at her, seeing the hope shining in her eyes. A treehouse, huh? I think we can manage that. In fact, I knelt down to her level. Why don't you help me design it? Her face lit up with excitement. Really? Can I? Of course, I said, pulling out my sketch pad. Let's start planning right now. As we sat there, heads bent together over the pad, sketching out her dream treehouse, I felt a warmth spread through my chest. This was what I had fought so hard for, these simple, precious moments with my daughter. Our planning session was interrupted by the buzz of my phone. I glanced at the screen, surprised to see Darcy Cordova's name. Emily, why don't you keep working on the treehouse design? I need to take this call, I said, stepping away. Hello, Darcy, I answered, curious about what Steve's ex-wife could want. Jarrett. Her voice was hesitant but determined. I hope I'm not bothering you. I wanted to thank you. I frowned, confused. Thank me? For what? For giving me the courage to stand up to Steve, she replied. Seeing you fight so hard for your daughter, it made me realize I could be strong too. I'm rebuilding my life now, and I owe a lot of that to you. Her words caught me off guard. I had been so focused on my own battle, I hadn't considered the ripple effects it might have had. I'm glad you're doing well, Darcy, I said sincerely. You deserved better than what Steve put you through. We talked for a few more minutes, Darcy sharing her plans for the future. As I hung up, I felt a sense of satisfaction. Out of all the pain and betrayal, something good had come. Weeks passed, and our new home neared completion. Emily's excitement grew with each passing day, her resilience in the face of all we'd been through never ceasing to amaze me. On the day we were set to move in, I woke early, a mixture of anticipation and nostalgia swirling in my chest. As I sipped my coffee, looking around our old house one last time, I realized how far we'd come. Emily bounded down the stairs, her eyes shining. Is it time, Daddy? Can we go to our new house now? I chuckled, ruffling her hair. Almost, sweetheart. We just need to wait for Uncle Vance and Aunt Laura to arrive. They're going to help us move, remember? As if on cue, there was a knock at the door. Vance and Laura stood there, both grinning widely. Ready to start your new life, Jarrett? Vance asked, clapping me on the shoulder. I nodded, feeling a lump form in my throat. More than ready. The move went smoothly, thanks to our friend's help. As evening fell, Emily explored every nook and cranny of her new room while I stood on the back porch, looking out over our new backyard. Laura joined me, handing me a glass of wine. You did it, Jarrett. You won. I took a sip, considering her words. It wasn't about winning, not really. It was about protecting Emily, giving her the life she deserves. Laura nodded, understanding in her eyes. And you've done that. You should be proud. As the sun set, casting a warm glow over our new home, I called everyone together. Emily, Vance, Laura, and even Sandra, who had been cautiously becoming a part of our lives, gathered on the porch. I raised my glass to new beginnings and to the family we choose. As we toasted, I looked at the faces around me, my daughter, beaming with joy, my friends who had stood by me through the darkest times, even Sandra, seeking redemption. This was my family now. Later that night, after everyone had left and Emily was tucked into her new bed, I stood in my room, looking out the window. The stars seemed brighter here, away from the city lights. I thought about Agnes and Steve, locked away in prison. I felt no anger anymore, no desire for further revenge. They had made their choices and were facing the consequences. My energy was better spent on the future, Emily's future. As I turned away from the window, my eyes fell on a framed photo on my nightstand. It was a new one, taken just last week, Emily and me, laughing as we painted her new room. Our faces were smudged with color, but our joy was unmistakable. This was what mattered. This was what I had fought for. And as I climbed into bed, listening to the quiet sounds of our new home settling around us, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. The road had been long and painful, but it had led us here to a place of peace, of hope, of new beginnings. And for that, I was grateful. As I drifted off to sleep, I smiled. Tomorrow was a new day, the first of many in our new life, and I couldn't wait to see what it would bring. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.